The sun was barely up when 17-year-old Tasha heard the familiar sound of her father's boots on the wooden floor of their new home. She pulled her pillow over her head, trying to block out the noise, but she knew there was no going back. To sleep. Life on a military base started early, and today was her first day at Jefferson High School. "Rise and shine, kiddo," her father called through her bedroom door. "Big day today?" Keisha groaned and sat up, looking around her new room. Boxes was still stacked in the corner, and her walls were bare except for one poster of her favorite singer that she'd managed to hang up the night before. Everything felt strange and unfamiliar. This was their fourth move in 6 years, but somehow this one felt different, harder. She got dressed quickly, choosing a simple outfit that she hoped wouldn't draw too much attention. As she walked to the kitchen, she could hear her father talking to someone outside. Through the window, she saw him with 2 beautiful German shepherds. Rex was the bigger one, with a thick coat and intelligent brown eyes. Luna was smaller, but just as alert, her ears always perked up and ready for action. "Those dogs are something else," her father said as she joined him outside. "Rex here can detect explosives from 50 feet away, and Luna's got the best nose I've ever worked with." Keisha scratched behind Rex's ears, and the big dog leaned into her touch. These weren't just pets, they were highly trained military working dogs, and her father was one of the best handlers on the base, but to Keisha, they were family. They'd been with them for 2 years now, and sometimes she felt like they understood her better than most people did. "You nervous about school?" her father asked, giving her a knowing look. "A little," she admitted. "It's just ... do you know how it is?" Her father nodded. He did know. Being one of the few black families in military housing wasn't always easy. People weren't usually mean about it, but there was always this feeling of being watched, of having to represent more than just yourself. "You'll be fine," he said, putting a hand on her shoulder. "You always are." The school bus ride was quiet. Keisha sat near the front, watching the other kids laugh and talk with their friends. She recognized a few faces from around the base, but nobody seemed interested in talking to the new girl. That was okay. She was used to being the outsider. Jefferson High School was bigger than her last school, with long hallways and lockers that seemed to stretch forever. The guidance counselor, Mrs. Peterson, was nice enough, walking her to her first class and explaining the layout of the building. "You'll do great here," Mrs. Peterson said with a smile. "If you need anything, just stop by my office." Her first few classes went okay. The teachers were polite, and a couple of students said hello, but nothing more. During lunch, Keisha sat alone at a table near the window, watching groups of friends chat and laugh together. She pulled out her phone and scrolled through pictures from her old school, missing her friends who were now hundreds of miles away. "You're the new girl, right?" Keisha looked up to see a boy with blonde hair and a confident smile standing next to her table. Behind him were 3 other kids, all watching her with curious expressions. "Yeah, I'm Keisha," she said, hoping this might be her chance to make some friends. "I'm Brad," the boy said. "My dad's Colonel Morrison. He runs most of the operations around here." Something about the way he said it made Keisha uncomfortable, but she smiled anyway. "Nice to meet you. So where are you from?" one of the other kids asked. "We just moved here from Texas," Keisha replied. "My dad's a dog handler." "Dog handler?" Brad laughed. "That's interesting." There was something in his tone that made Keisha's stomach tighten, but before she could say anything, the bell rang for the next class. After school, Keisha walked home instead of taking the bus. She needed time to think, and the fresh air felt good. The base was beautiful, with wide open spaces and tall trees everywhere. As she got closer to her house, she could hear her father's voice giving commands. "Rex, stay. Luna, heel." She found him in the backyard, working with both dogs on their training exercises. This was her favorite part of the day, watching her. Father and the dogs worked together like a perfect team. "How was school?" he asked, not taking his eyes off Rex, who was perfectly still despite the distractions around him. "It was okay," Keisha said, which wasn't exactly true, but she didn't want to worry him. "Just okay?" Her father knew her too well. "I met some kids." At lunch, they seemed interesting. Her father finally looked at her and she could see the concern in his eyes. Everything all right? Yeah, it's fine. Just first day stuff, you know? Rex broke his position and trotted over to Kaisha, nudging her hand with his nose. She smiled and patted his head. Sometimes she felt like the dogs could sense her emotions better than people could. Want to help me with their training? Her father asked. Kaisha nodded eagerly. This was something she actually enjoyed. Her father had been teaching her how to work with military dogs since she was 12, and she had a natural talent for it. She could read their body language and understand what they needed before they even knew it themselves. Luna, come, she called, and the dog immediately came to her side. Good girl. For the next hour, Kaisha helped her father put the dogs through their exercises. They practiced detection work, where the dogs had to find hidden objects using only their noses. They worked on obedience commands, making sure the dogs would respond instantly to any instruction. And they practiced protection work, where the dogs learned to defend their handlers if needed. You're getting really good at this, her father said as they finished up. Maybe you should think about becoming a handler yourself someday. Maybe, Kaisha said, though she wasn't sure what she wanted to do with her life yet. Right now, she just wanted to get through high school. That evening, as she sat in her room doing homework, she could hear her father on the phone with someone from his unit. They were talking about an upcoming deployment, and her stomach dropped. She'd been hoping they'd have more time to settle in before he had to leave again. She looked out her window and saw Rex and Luna in their kennels in the backyard. Even from here, she could see that they were alert, their ears up and their eyes scanning the area. They never really relaxed, even when they were supposed to be resting. That was part of their training. Always be ready, always be aware. Kaisha wished she could be more like them sometimes. Confident, strong, ready for anything. Instead, she felt like she was always trying to figure out where she fit in, always wondering if she was good enough, smart enough, tough enough. Her phone buzzed with a text from her best friend from Texas. How's the new school? Meet anyone cool yet? Kaisha stared at the message for a long time before typing back. Still figuring it out, miss you guys? As she got ready for bed, she could hear her father outside, doing one final check on Rex and Luna. It was part of their nightly routine, making sure the dogs were comfortable and secure. She knew he'd be up early tomorrow, starting all over again with their training. From her window, she watched him talking quietly to both dogs, checking their food and water, making sure they were okay. It was clear how much he loved them, and how much they trusted him. That kind of bond didn't happen overnight. It took time, patience, and a lot of hard work. Maybe that's what she needed to do with this new place. Be patient, work hard, and eventually she'd find her place here too. At least that's what she hoped. The second week at Jefferson High started like any other Monday morning. Kaisha walked into her first period class, hoping to find an empty seat near the back where she could blend in. But as she scanned the room, she noticed Brad and his friends already there, whispering and looking in her direction. Hey, it's the dog girl, one of them said loud enough for others to hear. A few students turned to look at her, and Kaisha felt her cheeks burn. She found a seat and tried to focus on her textbook, but she could feel their eyes on her. The teacher started the lesson, but Kaisha couldn't concentrate. Every few minutes, she heard quiet laughter from Brad's corner of the room. During lunch, Kaisha grabbed her tray and looked for somewhere to sit. She spotted an empty table and headed toward it, but before she could sit down, Brad appeared beside her. You know, I was thinking about what you said about your dad being a dog handler. He said, his voice friendly but his eyes cold. That's not really a real soldier's job, is it? What do you mean? Kaisha asked, confused. I mean, my dad leads actual missions. He makes real decisions that matter. Dog walking seems more like a hobby. His friends laughed, and Kaisha felt her anger rising. My father trains military working dogs. They save lives by detecting explosives and protecting soldiers. Right, Brad said, waving his hand dismissively. I'm sure that's what they tell you. Kaisha wanted to argue, to tell him about all the lives Rex and Luna had helped save, about her father's medals and commendations. But something in Brad's expression told her it wouldn't matter what she said. He'd already made up his mind about her and her family. The rest of the week got worse. In the hallways, Brad and his friends would make comments just loud enough for her to hear. "There goes the kennel keeper's daughter," or "I wonder if she barks like her dad's dogs." They never said anything directly to her face, nothing that would get them in trouble with teachers, but their message was clear. During gym class, when teams were being picked, Kaisha was always chosen last. In the cafeteria, she sat at a table. The other students would find reasons to move somewhere else. It wasn't obvious enough to complain about, but it was constant and exhausting. One afternoon, as she walked to her locker, she overheard two girls talking. "I heard her dad is just a maintenance guy who happens to work with dogs," one said. "My mom says those people always exaggerate what they do," the other replied. Kaisha stopped walking. "Those people," the words hit her like a punch to the stomach. She'd heard that phrase before, at other schools and other towns. It was always said with the same tone, the same dismissive attitude. That evening she sat in her room staring at her homework but unable to focus. Through her window she could see her father working with Rex and Luna in the backyard. The dogs were going through their detection training, carefully searching for hidden items. While her father watched with pride, her phone buzzed with a text from her friend back in Texas. "How's school going? Making friends?" Kaisha typed and deleted several responses before finally writing back. "It's fine. Just adjusting." She couldn't bring herself to tell the truth. Her father had enough to worry about with his upcoming deployment. The last thing he needed was to know that his daughter was being treated badly because of ignorant assumptions about their family. The next day brought a new challenge. During English class, they were assigned to work in groups for a project. Kaisha looked around hopefully, but no one made eye contact with her. The teacher started assigning students to groups, and Kaisha found herself grouped with Brad and two of his friends. "Great," Brad muttered under his breath. "This should be interesting." They were supposed to analyze a poem about courage and write a presentation together. As they huddled around a desk, Brad took charge immediately. "I'll handle the main analysis," he said. "Tyler, you do the research. Jake, you work on the presentation slides." He looked at Kaisha last. "You can, I don't know, check our spelling or something." "I'd like to contribute more than that," Kaisha said quietly. "Look, no offense, but this is important for our grades. My dad expects me to do well in all my classes. I can't risk having someone who doesn't understand the material mess things up." "What makes you think I don't understand the material?" Kaisha asked, her voice getting stronger. Brad shrugged. "Just being realistic. Different backgrounds, different capabilities." The word hung in the air like a slap. Kaisha stared at him, realizing that nothing she said or did would change his mind. He'd decided who she was before he even knew her. For the rest of the class, she sat quietly while the three boys planned their project. She took notes and tried to contribute ideas, but they were largely ignored. When the bell rang, she gathered her things quickly and left. Walking home that day, Kaisha took a longer route to avoid the group of kids who usually hung around the main entrance. She needed time to think, to figure out how to handle this situation. Part of her wanted to tell her father everything, but she knew he'd want to get involved, maybe even talk to the school. That would only make things worse. As she walked, she noticed a car following slowly behind her. When she looked back, she saw Brad driving with his friends in the passenger seats. They weren't doing anything threatening, just driving slowly and watching her. But it made her skin crawl. She turned down a side street and the car kept going straight. Maybe she was being paranoid, but she didn't think so. This felt like a message, a reminder that they were watching her. That night at dinner, her father noticed her picking at her food. "Everything okay, kiddo? You seem distracted lately." Just tired," she said, which wasn't completely untrue. The constant stress of school was exhausting. "Well, you can talk to me about anything, right?" "I know starting at a new school can be tough." Kaisha nodded, but she couldn't bring herself to tell him what was really happening. Her father had worked so hard to get where he was in the military. He'd faced his own challenges and discrimination. over the years, and she didn't want to add to his burdens. After dinner, she helped him with the dog's evening routine. Rex and Luna were always happy to see her, their tails wagging and their whole bodies wiggling with excitement. They didn't care about her skin color or her father's job or what anyone at school thought about them. They just cared about her. "You're getting really good with them," her father said as she worked with Luna on some basic commands. "They trust you completely." "How do you know when someone trusts you?" Kaisha asked. Her father looked at her carefully. "With dogs, it's easy. They show you through their actions. They come when you call, they stay when you ask, they protect you when you need it. With people, got to pause. He paused. With people, it's more complicated. But real trust is built over time, through consistency and respect. What if someone doesn't want to trust you? What if they've already made up their mind about who you are? Then that's their loss, her father said firmly. You can't force someone to see your worth, Kaisha, but you can't let their blindness make you forget it either. As she got ready for bed that night, Kaisha thought about her father's words. She looked out her window at Rex and Luna, now resting in their kennels. Even in sleep, they were alert, ready to protect their family if needed. Maybe that's what she needed to learn, how to be alert, how to protect herself, how to be strong, even when others tried to make her feel small. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight she felt a little bit braver than she had in weeks. 3 weeks had passed since the harassment began, and Kaisha felt like she was walking on eggshells every day. The morning started badly when she found her locker had been vandalized. Someone had written, "Go home," in black marker across the metal door. She quickly rubbed it off with her sleeve, hoping no one would notice. But her hands were shaking. During first period, Brad and his friends kept turning around to stare at her. They whispered among themselves and laughed, making her feel like she was the punchline of some cruel joke. When the teacher asked a question about the reading assignment, Kaisha raised her hand to answer, but Brad interrupted. "I don't think she actually read it," he said with a smirk. "Maybe books are too advanced for her," the teacher frowned. "That's enough, Brad. Kaisha, please continue with your answer." But the damage was done. Kaisha's confidence crumbled, and she stumbled through her response, feeling everyone's eyes on her. She could hear quiet snickers from around the room. At lunch, things got worse. Kaisha was carrying her tray when someone accidentally bumped into her. Her food scattered across the floor and the cafeteria fell silent. She knelt down to clean up the mess, her cheeks burning with embarrassment. "Oops," Brad said, standing nearby with his friends. "Sorry about that. Maybe you should be more careful." A few students helped her clean up, but most just stared or looked away. Kaisha threw away her ruined lunch and spent the rest of the period in the library, her stomach growling but her appetite gone. After school, she couldn't bear the thought of riding the bus. The idea of sitting there while Brad and his friends made comments behind her back was too much. She decided to walk home instead. Even though it was a longer route, the October air was crisp, and the leaves were starting to change colors. Under different circumstances, Kaisha might have enjoyed the walk. But today she just wanted to get home to the safety of her room and the comfort of Rex and Luna. She took a shortcut through the wooded area that bordered the base. It was a path she'd walked before, quiet and peaceful, with tall trees on both sides. She was halfway through when she heard footsteps behind her. She turned around and saw Brad approaching with 4 other boys from school. Her heart started racing. They were far from the main road with no houses or people around. No one would hear her if she called for help. "Hey, dog girl," Brad called out, his voice different now, meaner. "Where are you going in such a hurry?" Just walking home," Kaisha said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Through our woods," one of the other boys said. "These woods belong to families who actually belong here." They formed a circle around her, and Kaisha felt panic rising in her chest. She'd never been in a situation like this before, and she didn't know what to do. "Look, I don't want any trouble," she said, backing toward a large tree. "I just want to go home." "Trouble?" Brad laughed, but it wasn't a friendly sound. "You think you can just show up here and act like you belong? Your dad playing with dogs doesn't make you special?" "My father serves his country," Kaisha said, finding some courage. He's risking his life to protect people like you. People like me? Brad's face twisted with anger. You think you're better than us? You think coming here with your attitude and your whole family gives you the right to look down on us? I never looked down on anyone, Kaisha protested. I just wanted to fit in. Well, you don't fit in, another boy said. And you never will. They stepped closer, and Kaisha pressed her back against the tree. She could smell their cologne and see the anger in their eyes. This wasn't just about school anymore. This was about something deeper, something uglier. Maybe we should teach you a lesson about respect, Brad said. His voice low and threatening. One of the boys grabbed her backpack and yanked it off her shoulders. Her books scattered across the ground and her phone fell into the leaves. Another boy stepped on her notebook, grinding it into the dirt with his heel. Stop it! Kaisha shouted, but her voice sounded small and scared. Or what? Brad pushed her shoulder, making her stumble. You going to call your daddy and his little dogs? They laughed, and the sound made Kaisha's skin crawl. She tried to move away from the tree, but they blocked her path. She was trapped, and they knew it. Please, she said, hating how desperate. She sounded, just leave me alone. Too late for that, Brad said. You should have thought about that before you came here thinking you were better than everyone else. One of the boys picked up a stick and poked her arm with it. Maybe we should see how tough you really are. Kaisha felt tears starting to form in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing her cry. You know what I heard? Brad said, leaning closer. I heard your kind always thinks they're victims. Always making excuses. Always blaming other people for their problems. The words hit her like physical blows. She'd heard similar things before, at other schools and other towns. But somehow, hearing them here, in this isolated place with no one to help her, made them feel more dangerous. I'm not making excuses, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Sure. You are, Brad said. That's all you people know how to do. The circle tightened around her. She could feel their anger, their excitement at having her cornered. This wasn't just bullying anymore. This was something much worse, Kaisha's mind raced. Her father had taught her some basic self-defense, but there were 5 of them and only one of her. She thought about screaming, but who would hear her? They were too far from the road, too deep in the woods. Then she remembered something her father had given her on her first day of school, an emergency whistle. He'd made her promise to carry it always, just in case. She'd thought it was silly at the time, but now she reached into her pocket desperately. What are you doing? Brad demanded, grabbing her wrist. Nothing, Kaisha said, but her fingers found the whistle. Don't lie to me, Brad said, his grip tightening. I'm tired of your lies. The other boys moved closer, and Kaisha knew she was running out of time. Whatever they were planning to do, it was about to happen. She could see it in their faces, the way they looked at her like she was something less than human dot with all her strength. She pulled her hand free and brought the whistle to her lips. She blew as hard as she could, the sharp sound cutting through the afternoon air like a knife. Shut up, Brad shouted, lunging for the whistle, but Kaisha blew it again, and again the sound echoing through the trees. The boys looked around nervously, suddenly realizing how exposed they were. Come on, one of them said. Someone might hear that? So. What? Brad said, but his confidence was shaking. There's nobody around? Kaisha blew the whistle one more time, putting every ounce of fear and desperation into the sound. It was her only hope, her only chance. Someone had to hear it. Someone had to come. The boys stood around her, angry and uncertain. They'd come. This far, crossed this line, and now they didn't know what to do next. The whistle had changed everything, broken their sense of control. We should go, another boy said, looking toward the path. No, Brad said, but he didn't sound as sure as before. We're not done here. Kaisha clutched the whistle in her shaking hand, ready to blow it again if they moved closer. Her heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. She'd never been so scared in her entire life. The woods around them seemed to hold their breath, waiting to see what would happen next. The sound of the whistle echoed through the trees for what felt like forever. Kaisha's lungs burned, but she kept the whistle ready, her eyes darting between the 5 boys who surrounded her. They looked nervous now, glancing at each other and toward the path. "That's enough of that noise," Brad said, reaching for the whistle again, but before he could grab it, something changed in the woods around them. The birds stopped chirping. Even the wind seemed to pause. There was a stillness that made everyone freeze. Then they heard it, a low, rumbling sound that seemed to come from everywhere at once. It wasn't quite a growl, but it wasn't friendly either. The boys looked around, confused and suddenly alert. What was that? One of them whispered. Brad tried to maintain his confidence. "Probably just a squirrel or something. Don't be stupid." But Kaisha knew that sound. She'd heard it during training sessions with her father. It was the sound Rex made when he was focused, when he was tracking something important. Her heart jumped with hope, but she was almost afraid to believe it. The rustling in the bush grew louder. Branches snapped and leaves scattered as something large moved through the forest. The boys stepped back from Kaisha, their attention now split between her and whatever was approaching. "Maybe we should get out of here," one of them said, his voice shaky. "No," Brad said, but he didn't sound as sure as before. "We're not running from some woodland creature." That's when Rex burst through the trees. The German Shepherd was magnificent and terrifying all at once. His thick coat was slightly dusty from running through the woods, and his intelligent brown eyes were locked on the group of boys. He didn't bark or snarl, but his presence filled the clearing with an unmistakable authority. The boys stumbled backward, their circle breaking apart instantly. Rex positioned himself between Kaisha and the group, his stance protective but controlled. This wasn't an angry dog about to attack. This was a highly trained, military working dog who understood exactly what was happening. "Holy ... The boys started to say, but his words died in his throat as Luna appeared from the other side of the clearing. The second German Shepherd moved like flowing water, silent and graceful. She took a position on Kaisha's other side, creating a protective barrier. Both dogs were perfectly still, but their eyes never left the boys. There was something almost supernatural about their focus, their complete attention to the threat in front of them. "Where did they come from?" Brad whispered, all his earlier confidence gone. Kaisha felt tears of relief streaming down her face. "Rex," she said softly, and the big dog's ear twitched slightly. Acknowledging her but never taking his eyes off the boys, the silence stretched on, heavy with tension. The boys stood frozen, unsure of what to do. They'd been in control just moments before, but now they were face to face with 2 animals that could easily overpower them if they chose to. "They're just dogs," Brad said, but his voice was shaking. "They won't actually do anything." As if responding to his words, Rex took a single step forward. It was a small movement, but it spoke volumes. The boys immediately stepped back, nearly tripping over each other. "I don't think those are regular dogs," one of them said, his voice barely above a whisper. Luna made a soft sound, not quite a growl, but definitely a warning. Her eyes were fixed on the boy who had grabbed Kaisha's backpack. He was still holding it, and she seemed to understand that he had something that didn't belong to him. "Put the bag down," Kaisha said, finding her voice again, slowly. The boy looked at the backpack like it was on fire. He set it down gently and stepped away from it, his hands raised slightly. That's when they heard footsteps approaching fast through the woods. Heavy boots on fallen leaves, moving with purpose and urgency. Kaisha's father appeared in the clearing, slightly out of breath but alert and ready for anything. He took in the scene instantly. His daughter pressed against a tree, 5 boys standing in a loose group, and his 2 dogs maintaining their protective positions. Years of military training kicked in, and his face became a mask of controlled anger. "Nobody move," he said, his voice carrying the authority of someone used to being obeyed without question. The boys froze completely. This wasn't just any adult who had stumbled onto their confrontation. This was a soldier, and everything about him, from his posture to his tone, made it clear that he was someone to be taken seriously. "Rex, Luna, stay," he commanded, and both dogs remained perfectly still while keeping their eyes on the boys. Kaisha's father pulled out his phone and dialed a number. "This is Staff Sergeant Johnson. I need base security and local police at the Northwoods training area immediately. We have a situation involving assault on a minor." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. The boys looked at each other with growing panic, finally understanding the seriousness of what they'd done. "Sir, we weren't really doing anything," Brad said, trying to sound reasonable. "We were just talking." "Really?" Kaisha's father said, his voice dangerously quiet. "Is that why my daughter used her emergency whistle? Is that why she's crying? Is that why my dogs tracked a distress signal to find 5 boys cornering one girl in the middle of the woods?" Brad opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. The evidence was overwhelming and everyone knew it. "Here's what's going to happen," Kaisha's father continued. "You're all going to sit down right where you are and wait for the authorities to arrive. You're going to keep your hands where I can see them, and you're not going to say another word. Unless I ask you a direct question." The boys sat down heavily, their earlier aggression completely deflated. They looked young and scared now, nothing like the threatening group they'd been just minutes before. Kaisha's father approached her slowly, keeping his movements calm so as not to excite the dogs. "Are you hurt?" he asked gently. "No," Kaisha sighed, wiping her eyes. "They didn't actually touch me. They just they were going to." Her father's jaw tightened, but he kept his voice steady. "You did exactly the right thing with the whistle?" Rex and Luna heard it from almost half a mile away. "How did you know where to find me?" Kaisha asked. "The dogs led me here," he said. "They knew you were in trouble before I did." Rex started getting agitated during our training session, and when we heard the whistle, they both took off running. I just followed them. In the distance, they could hear sirens approaching. The boys looked even more panicked now, the reality of their situation finally sinking in. "Rex, Luna, come," Kaisha's father said, and both dogs moved to his side. Still alert but no longer in protection mode, Kaisha knelt down and buried her face in Rex's thick fur. The big dog leaned against her, offering comfort in his own way. Luna pressed against her other side, and for the first time in weeks, Kaisha felt truly safe. "Thank you," she whispered to both dogs. "Thank you for finding me." Her father put his hand on her shoulder. "Let's get you home," he said. "But first, we need to talk to the police." As they waited for the authorities to arrive, Kaisha looked at the 5 boys sitting in the dirt, their faces pale and frightened. They seemed so small now, so powerless. It was hard to believe they had scared her so much just minutes before. Rex and Luna stayed close to her side, their presence a reminder that she wasn't alone. She had a family that would protect her and friends who would come running when she needed them most. The next 2 hours changed everything. Police cars and military vehicles filled the small parking area near the woods. Officers interviewed everyone separately, taking detailed statements about what had happened. Kaisha sat in the back of her father's truck with Rex and Luna beside her, watching as Brad and his friends were questioned by both civilian police and military investigators. "Why are there so many people here?" Kaisha asked her father, who was reviewing paperwork with a detective. "Because this happened on federal property," he explained. "And because hate crimes are taken very seriously, especially on military bases. What those boys did wasn't just bullying, Kaisha. It was assault with clear racist motivation." The words felt strange to hear out loud. For weeks, Kaisha had tried to convince herself that maybe she was overreacting, that maybe it wasn't as bad as it seemed. But hearing it described officially made her realize how serious the situation really was. Detective Rivera, a kind woman with gentle eyes, sat down next to Kaisha. "I know this has been a difficult day, but I want you to know that we take incidents like this very seriously. Those boys will face consequences for their actions." "What kind of consequences?" Kaisha asked. "Well, they'll definitely be suspended from school pending a full investigation. Depending on what the district attorney decides, they could also face criminal charges. And since this happened on a military base, there will be additional military justice proceedings." Brad's father, Colonel Morrison, arrived an hour later. Keisha watched through the truck window as he spoke with the investigators, his face growing darker with each revelation. When he looked toward his son, sitting handcuffed in the back of a police car, his expression was one of complete disappointment and anger. "That's going to be a difficult conversation," Keisha's father said quietly, following her gaze. The investigation continued for several more hours. Keisha's phone was recovered from the leaves and used as evidence, along with her torn notebook and scattered belongings. The officers took photos of everything, documenting the scene thoroughly. When they finally got home that evening, Keisha felt emotionally drained. Her father made her favorite dinner while Rex and Luna stayed close by, as if they sensed she still needed their protection. "Are you okay?" her father asked as they sat down to eat. "I think so," Keisha said. "I just feel different, like something changed today." "A lot of things changed today," her father agreed. "You stood up for yourself when it mattered most. You were smart and brave, and you used the tools I gave you to stay safe." "I was so scared," Keisha admitted. "I thought they were really going to hurt me." "Being scared doesn't make you weak," her father said. "Being scared and still doing the right thing makes you strong." Over the next few days, news of the incident spread throughout the base and the school. Keisha was surprised by how many people reached out to support her. Students she'd never spoken to before stopped her in the hallways to tell her they were glad she was okay. Teachers made special efforts to check on her and make sure she felt safe in their classrooms. The 5 boys were immediately suspended from school. Brad and 2 others were also arrested and charged with assault and hate crimes. Colonel Morrison requested a transfer to another base, unable to face the embarrassment of his son's actions. The military took the incident so seriously that it prompted a base-wide review of anti-discrimination policies, but perhaps the most unexpected change came from the other students. A group of kids approached Keisha during lunch on her first day. "Beck, hey, can we sit with you?" asked a girl named Ashley, who Keisha recognized from her English class. "Of course," Keisha said, surprised but pleased. "We want to tell you how sorry we are," another student said. "We saw what was happening, and we should have said something sooner. A lot of us were scared of Brad and his friends," Ashley explained. "But what happened to you made us realize that staying quiet just makes things worse." From that day forward, Keisha was never alone at lunch again. The group of students who had been too afraid to stand up before became some of her closest friends. They formed an unofficial support network, looking out for each other and speaking up when they saw discrimination or bullying. 2 weeks after the incident, Keisha was called to the principal's office. She walked in nervously, still not entirely comfortable with authority figures after everything that had happened. "Keisha, please sit down," Principal Martinez said with a warm smile. "I wanted to talk to you about something positive for once." He handed her a letter from the district superintendent. As she read it, her eyes widened in surprise. "They want me to speak at the anti-bullying assembly?" she asked. "Your story has already made a difference here," Principal Martinez explained. "Students are more willing to report incidents now. They're standing up for each other. The district thinks your experience could help other schools too." Keisha thought about it carefully. The idea of standing in front of hundreds of people and talking about the worst day of her life was terrifying. But she also thought about other kids who might be going through similar experiences, feeling alone and scared like she had. "Can Rex and Luna come with me?" she asked. Principal Martinez laughed. "I think that can be arranged." The assembly was held 3 weeks later in the school gymnasium. Keisha stood at the podium with Rex and Luna sitting calmly beside her, looking out at an audience of students, teachers, and parents. Her father sat in the front row, beaming with pride. "A month ago, I was the new kid who just wanted to fit in," she began, her voice steady despite her nerves. "I thought if I stayed quiet and didn't cause trouble, everything would work out fine. But staying quiet almost got me seriously hurt." She told her story simply and honestly, explaining how the harassment had escalated and how close she'd come to real danger. She talked about the importance of speaking up, both for yourself and for others who might be too scared to do it alone. "I was lucky," she said, gesturing to Rex and Luna. "I had backup coming. but a lot of kids don't. That's why it's so important for all of us to be that backup for each other." The response was overwhelming. Students lined up afterward to talk to her, to share their own experiences, and to thank her for her courage. Many wanted to pet Rex and Luna, who handled the attention with typical military dog composure. Over the following months, Kaisha became an advocate for anti-bullying programs throughout the district. She spoke at several more schools, always accompanied by Rex and Luna, who became local celebrities in their own right. The local newspaper wrote a feature story about them titled "Heroes with Four Legs and Hearts of Gold." Her father's deployment was delayed due to the legal proceedings, which turned out to be a blessing in disguise. It gave them time to process what had happened and to work together on the advocacy programs that had grown out of Kaisha's experience. "You know what the best part of all this is?" her father asked one evening as they worked with Rex and Luna in the backyard. "What's that?" Kaisha replied, watching Luna perfectly execute a complex training routine. "You found your place here," he said. "Not by staying quiet and trying to fit in, but by standing up and being yourself." Kaisha smiled, scratching Rex behind the ears. "I had good teachers," she said, looking at both her father and the dogs who had saved her life. As the sun set over the base, casting long shadows across the training field, Kaisha felt a sense of peace she hadn't experienced in months. She'd faced her worst fear and survived. She'd found her voice and used it to help others. And she'd learned that sometimes the best way to fit in is to stand out for all the right reasons. Rex barked once, breaking the peaceful silence, and Luna immediately responded with a playful bow. They began to wrestle gently in the grass, their training temporarily forgotten in favor of simple joy. Kaisha laughed, and the sound carried across the base like a promise of better days ahead.